I needed to go for a walk that day. It didn't matter that I had been exhausted the day before, it didn't matter that I was supposed to have one of my friends over in a matter of hours, I needed to go on a walk that day. Lincoln Avenue. Just 2 words. That's all I could remember thinking. Lincoln Avenue. A completely random, inconsequential street name that I'm sure you could find in almost any state across the country. But when I woke up that morning, I couldn't think of anything but that one name. Lincoln Avenue. Like always, part of me just wanted to ignore it. To ignore the name, and the voice that, for the moment, gently whispered it to me as though the voice was speaking from within my mind. If it was just for my sake, I would have, please believe me when I say that. It wasn't just for my sake though. My dad had been in the hospital 2 weeks prior for a head injury. I could still remember the call I'd gotten from my sister when it happened. "Dude, you need to get to Flower Hospital now." "Why? Finally decided to get that stick out of your dash?" "Just shut up and listen. Dad fell and hit his head, he must have been working on the roof or something." "What? I thought he was getting some contractors to work on that?" "Well, apparently not, Dan. Get to the hospital now, they're taking him to the emergency room now." If past events were any indication, my dad's life depended entirely on what I did within the next 24 hours. I'd be lying if I said that he and I had the closest relationship even before the incident, let alone in the last 5 years since I'd moved out. I was sure in some way he still resented me for leaving, just as much as I still partly resented him for shutting down. Aside from the past few months, we'd barely even made any effort to repair our friendship, let alone what could be called a father-son relationship. But he was the only parent I had left, and we were finally starting to love each other again. I needed him. More than that, Kathy needed him. They'd been each other's rocks after everything happened, and I knew how badly it had affected all of us when Mom died. I couldn't afford to let myself or Kathy go through that again. On any other day, the weather outside would have been idyllic, I guess it still was. Blue skies, a breeze just gentle enough to keep me cool while the sun hung high above, only a few small clouds peppering the expanse of blue, and a few birds singing their songs. It felt almost insulting, considering what was about to happen. As I took my first steps and passed the borders of my yard, I heard all the confirmation I needed to know that I was beyond the point of no return. The voice was whispering the street again. Lincoln Avenue. I had already walked about a mile when my phone began ringing again. Even without looking, I could almost guarantee that it was going to be Kathy again, calling for the 100th time to give me some update to Dad's condition. I didn't bother answering, I was in no mood to hear that things hadn't gotten any better, or worse, that he had gone fully unresponsive. The clock was already ticking, seeing how fast it was winding down wouldn't change that. It wasn't a simple straight shot. At certain intervals I would hear the voice calling out again, instructing me to go left or right, down paths I had driven past countless times, routes that I could drive in minutes or less, now passing by uncomfortably slowly. Right. Left. Right. Straight. Before I'd even realized it, an hour had passed, and I was trekking on the side of a busy street. Restaurants, stores, and gas stations littered either side of the road, cars whizzed past me as the sidewalk became wider, and I was no longer the only pedestrian walking along it. Some walked dogs, others jogged, and others still casually walked along as they remained glued to their phones. None paid any mind to me. Out of sheer habit, I pulled my own phone out and checked my Steps app to see just how far I had gone. According to it, I had traveled only a little more than 3 miles. 3 miles, a little over an hour of walking. I wondered just how much further I had to go. As it turned out, it wasn't much farther at all. I had been carefully checking each street sign I passed on my forced pilgrimage, hoping each time that the one I passed would be my ever-so-sought Lincoln Avenue. 2 hours in, I finally found it. Just past an old apartment complex, the small green sign said in partially chopped lettering, Lincoln Avenue. My chest tightened as I read the name aloud. Doubts began to creep into my mind as I clenched my fist. Was I really doing this again? What if I was wrong? Maybe I was just going through some kind of waking nightmare, hearing things that weren't there. Lord knows, I hadn't been getting much sleep in the last few weeks. I remembered reading in a medical report somewhere that the human mind begins to break down even after just 24 hours of not getting any sleep, and that there was potential of both visual and auditory hallucinations after 48. The same report claimed that while you could theoretically survive on just 4 hours of sleep for every 24, you could still feel the negative effects of sleep deprivation over an extended time. Maybe that included the aforementioned hallucinations? I couldn't remember the last time I'd slept more than 5 hours after Dad was admitted. Maybe that's all this was? 209 Lincoln Avenue. Red roses. The voice was back, and the illusion was shattered. I could justify hearing a random street like before. The name had to be common. This, however, was specific. An exact address, and based on the sound of it, something to identify the specific house I needed to go to. I still wanted to believe that this was just a bunch of hallucinations, I really did. But I could still remember the times I had done this before, what had happened the one time I refused. I could see Mom. Shattered. Just. The street was just like any other you drive by on the way to something actually significant. Rows upon rows of houses, a few small intersections marking the various blocks, a mix of trimmed and not so trimmed grass, and the occasional tree in the front yard. The sky was blue, plenty of clouds. I could hear unseen birds singing their songs as what normally would be an idyllic, practically picturesque day moved along undisturbed. If I hadn't known any better, I may have stopped to enjoy a walk through the neighborhood. As it was, I couldn't enjoy my time here. I had work to do, and I just wanted it over with. To any unsuspecting eyes, which was realistically all of them, there was nothing interesting to see about me. A stranger passing by, maybe out getting some exercise in. Ideally, I would be so unremarkable that whoever lived here wouldn't even realize I had crossed paths with them. I would be just another nameless and blurry face, too unclear to even remember right. I would need that indifference. Each house I passed was mostly the same. Simple, 1 to 2 stories, a side driveway that fit multiple cars, and some variation of flowers. The neighborhood didn't look high-end, but it wasn't struggling either. Most of the houses had some variation of one person mowing their lawns or otherwise doing yard work, or children running and playing while adults looked on. I felt the guilt of what was happening well up in me as some of the adults raised their hands in polite courtesy waves I had to fight myself to return. This was supposed to be a safe space. A place where families could enjoy their time together. And here I was, prowling like a lion seeking to tear it all apart. I'd long stopped trying to separate myself from the voice's consequences. There was no point to it. I may have abhorred the choices I made and what they would lead to, but I made them regardless. All I could do was tell myself that my father was worth what was coming, that my sister was worth it, because I knew I wasn't. One by one I passed the houses, watching the numbers, noting the flowers. 199, pink lilies. 201, blue hydrangeas. 203, white orchids. 205, red spider lilies. 207, black roses. 209, Lincoln Avenue was like many of the houses I had passed. Well kept, in good repair, a flower bed neatly tended to, red roses vibrant and almost seeming to sparkle in the sunlight. At the end of the street was a set of guardrails blocking off a small set of woods, just small enough that I could see through the cracks to an open field. My heart felt heavy enough to sink into my shoes as I observed the house. It had been freshly painted, a chalk drawing of 2 large stick figures and a third, smaller one smiled brightly in the driveway. What was I doing? I couldn't do this. I had to do this. I couldn't do this. I had to do this. Hey, buddy. Can I help you? This voice wasn't in my head, it was right to the side of me. A man's voice. Turning to look at the man, I came face to face with a well-kept man in his mid-30s, maybe 10 years older than myself. He had short, neatly trimmed black hair with an equally maintained beard. He wore a plain, featureless white shirt, and was carrying what looked to be a bag of groceries. Restaurant. Do it. The voice half instructed, half demanded. Its tone was different this time. Gone was the whisper and in its place was an almost childlike eagerness. I recognized the tone immediately, and my stomach churned. Oh, hey, I replied, feigning a confused expression as I looked from the house back to the man. a mix of impatience and frustration on his face. "I think I got turned around somewhere. I'm looking for that new steakhouse that was moved in a few weeks ago." I lied. Immediately the man's expression softened, and he even chuckled to himself as he shook his head. "Lincoln's Steakhouse?" he asked. I nodded. "Yeah, you're not the first to have wound up here." "You got a phone on you?" he asked. Despite every bone in my body telling me to stop, to turn and run, I pulled my phone from my pocket, opened the GPS app, and handed it to the man. I watched as the man punched in some unknown address into my phone with his free hand, resisting every urge to snatch it away. I could practically hear the voice salivating in anticipation as the man handed my phone back to me. "There you go, man, should be good to go now." I faked a laugh as I rubbed the back of my head. "Sorry about that, didn't mean to intrude or anything." The man shook his head and waved the apology aside. "You're like the third guy that's happened to this month, not a big deal." His guard was down, I could tell by his tone. It was now or never. "Dan," I said, introducing myself as I extended my hand. I prayed my hands weren't sweating, that my heart, beating like the stampede of 1,000 frightened animals, would hold out for just a few minutes longer. That my breath would not betray the anxiety in my soul. The man glanced with seeming amusement at my hand, then, with a tired sigh, took it. "Chuck," he offered kindly, shaking my hand. Chuck. My father's name. Of course, I thought. For a moment, I wondered when he had become a father, if he too had an elder son, maybe a daughter on the way. How closely did his family mirror my own? I would never get the answers to those questions, not that I deserved them anyway. As I released Chuck's hand, a pressure released in my head, like a congestion clearing after days of thickness. The voice was silent, gone. It was finished. "I hope you have a good rest of your day," I offered sheepishly. It was the first true thing I'd told Chuck since I'd met him, save my name. Chuck merely gave a polite wave of the hand, then marched up his sidewalk and towards his door. I did not watch him enter. I did not linger to see what would happen. The walk home felt longer, more exhausting. A rational mind would have said it was due to how far I had already walked. A guilty one would say it was the shame of falling back into a hated habit, one I tried time and time again to shake ever since that voice had become bound to me in that stupid childhood game so many years ago. The truth was probably somewhere in the middle, a mix of both physical and mental exhaustion. The sudden emptiness from the loss of the voice probably didn't help. For a moment, I hoped beyond practicality that the voice would stay gone this time. That Chuck would be its final victim, that just maybe, this time it would be satiated. I didn't want the temptation anymore, or the fear of losing anyone else. I knew that's all it was though, just a hope. The voice always came back. Surely enough, just as I got home and opened my door, I felt a familiar, crippling weight seep into my head. I hurried and slammed the door closed and pinned my back against it, both ready, and not ready for what came next. All around me I heard a sickening crunching, ripping, and snapping. Phantom pains would flare in my own limbs for moments at a time, but never long enough to truly understand what he was going through. The voice moaned happily as it enjoyed its meal, either oblivious to my awareness, or indifferent to it. I pictured Chuck playing with a little boy I had never seen, a wife I would never know. Tears welled in my eyes as I heard a series of pops, followed by a giddy laughter and more moaning. Even now I find myself hoping Chuck, and all of my victims were already dead whenever this was happening. I could barely stand their fate as it was, to know they were alive during all this. That mom was alive during it, I just couldn't handle it. I'm not sure how long I stayed there, curled by the door, rocking myself gently back and forth. Even after the noises stopped, I couldn't bring myself to move. Long after the light of day had stopped pouring into my home, leaving me shrouded in darkness, I was still there. I suppose I must have gotten up at some point, because the next thing I remembered was waking up in my own bed, window blinds open, still dark outside. Had I fallen asleep, or simply been so out of it that I hadn't remembered going to the bedroom? A familiar ringtone snapped me out of my head. I looked beside my bed to the nightstand, my phone lighting up with Kathy's name identifying her as the caller. Though I suspected I already knew what the call was about, I answered anyway. I did the best I could to feign surprise as she told me Dad was making a recovery, that he was lucid. Just like always, the voice had kept its end of the deal. Just like I feared it would. Just like I knew it would. After a few more minutes of conversation, I wished Kathy a good night, another brief moment of sincerity. I wanted to be happy my father was alive, that Kathy would get to have him in her life for a while longer. That I would get the chance to fully reconcile our relationship, that we could be a family again. But the happiness was a shallow one. A drop in the proverbial hole that I hadn't stopped digging 14 years ago. How many bodies were in that hole now, I wondered. I desperately wanted to sleep. In my dreams I could forget what had happened, be blissfully unaware of everything if even for a few hours. Instead, I went to the internet, lying on my back as I searched for my most local news station. I wasn't sure why I was doing this, I already knew what I'd find. Maybe it was my own form of penance, my own way of forcing myself to acknowledge what I had really done. As the page loaded, I saw it. The top story. Local man found eviscerated in his home. Suspect currently unknown. If you are called to work in a circus, as a precaution, do not accept. Part 1. It was a normal Sunday night and like every Sunday, I was sad. You know when you're reflecting on your current situation, all alone at home? I was doing that. I'm 23 years old, with no family, no friends, no job, no one. I could disappear from the world right now and nothing would change in anyone's life. I was about to go eat some expired canned food that I would definitely regret eating later when I heard a knock on the door. Just 2 knocks and nothing else. I was a little scared. I think you would be too if you had no one to visit you and you heard a knock on the door at night. I stood there staring at the door for a few seconds wondering if I should go see who it was. About 3 minutes passed and no one knocked on the door again. But a leaflet appeared under the door. I was scared, but I went over to get it, even though I was afraid of getting close to the door and having it open and the person outside taking me to the world of darkness. Maybe I'm a little scared. I looked at the flyer. It looked like those college flyers with foldouts telling about the campus. It had written in Arial font right in the middle of the flyer, with white letters and completely black paper, "Minimalism is in fashion, right? Looking for a job opportunity? To be your own boss, have financial freedom? Call us at phone number." Well, I wanted all of that, but it was clearly a scam, and it was all a bit strange. A person knocked on my door and stood there waiting, and when he realized I wasn't going to open the door, he slipped this under the door in the middle of the night, as if he knew I was home at that time and heard the knock, so he waited. He didn't slip the flyer under the door right away. Who delivers flyers at night? And it doesn't have the name of the company, just a strange phrase and a number. I was desperate for a job, of course I was, but was I desperate enough to call that number? I went to the kitchen, opened the cupboard doors, nothing, there was nothing there. I called the number. A woman answered the phone. "Hi. Hello, are you interested in changing your life? Finally having freedom." "Yes, of course, what is a job to do?" "Well, we're looking for a handyman, to work at the incredible address." "At the abandoned circus in town?" I thought to myself, what's this? A story about nosebleed? It's not abandoned, sir. Many people go on the rides. We need someone to fix the small problems that may arise on the rides. If there's any problem, you have to go and fix it quickly. Are you interested in filling the position? What would the salary be? Night shift, 9 a.m. to 3 a.m., $25 an hour. I accepted the position. I know what you're thinking, working in a circus in the middle of the night, until 3 a.m., literally when the devils are loose, this guy must be crazy. I understand why you think that, but not having food at home makes you take desperate measures. I'm not a person who knows everything about fixing things, but since I've never had the money to hire someone to fix any problems I had in my house, I learned to do it myself, and this circus is kind of broke, so they can't break things too much since in order to break them, People have to use the rides. The next day I was there. I'll describe the place to you. A place that must be the size of about 3 parking lots together, with several amusement park rides and right in the middle a tent, that classic circus tent, red and white. For a broke place it was actually pretty, as far as possible. Some rides were kind of poorly lit and boring. I wouldn't go here if I were a child, or even an adult to tell the truth. It's the kind of place a rebellious teenager would go to spray paint on the walls. I was restless. I arrived there and there was no one there. No one came to greet me or tell me what I needed to do. Nothing. The moment I looked around I had a thought that I hated myself for having had. You know when you have an almost impulsive thought, that almost seems like a fact. I feel like prey lured into the forest, where the trap is. I got a little nervous after thinking that, a strange pamphlet, delivered at a strange time, by a strange person that I didn't even know who it was, with strange things written on it, to work in a strange place, with a strangely good salary, we have to agree that it's a little strange. I turned to leave, seriously, an abandoned circus/park, calling for someone who no one would miss if he mysteriously disappeared. No one would press charges. How stupid was I? I'll never fall for that again. Where are you going? A voice behind me said. Got scared and turned around abruptly. Hi, I didn't see anyone so I was leaving. I thought I was in the wrong place maybe. I laughed nervously. You're in the right place. You must be the new handyman, right? Yes, it's me. Come on, I'll show you around. We walked while he explained some things about the park to me. I felt stupid after he explained everything to me. He said that the circus opens in the morning and stays open until 8 p.m. and if there's anything to fix I'll be informed so I can fix it before the next morning. So everything is in order and the circus can operate normally the next morning. He explained to me that whenever I arrive I should go to a room that would be my workroom, that I shouldn't wait for him. He was only here because it was my first day. I should go straight to my room and on the table there will be all the things that need some repairs or just need to be dusted. We shook hands and he left through the door and closed it behind him. When I was alone in my room I realized how small and suffocating it was. There were tools everywhere, some cleaning products, a very small table and chair. I soon realized that my room was actually the place where they kept the junk they didn't want anyone to see. I picked up the 2 papers that were on the table and froze. No, it can't be. This isn't some silly Reddit story. This isn't a horror movie. Please tell me it isn't. I read the header of the first paper, List of Rules. Seriously, how could that be a good sign? I'm rational and this is real life. It's not a story. These things don't happen in real life, right? It must be just a list of places where I should be more careful when cleaning. Of course, that must be it. I was afraid to read it, but I started reading it anyway. It only had 3 rules. List of rules. 1. Just do your job. If other employees come asking for your help, or offering help, don't accept, turn around and continue your tasks, don't respond. The more you talk, the more they will insist and maybe convince you. 2. At 5 minutes to 3 o'clock, leave immediately, don't wait until 3 o'clock to leave the park, it can be dangerous. 3. Under no circumstances go into the circus tent. You may hear the noise of things falling or people talking things that might make you curious, loud laughter, but it's not your problem. Don't go in. I repeat, do not go in. Good luck. Part 2, coming soon. We had been friends for 13 years and in those years I had not once slept at his house. So, why the sudden invite? I asked. I settled the duffel on my shoulder and he held the door. My parents are going out, he said, and the words came out of him in a rush. Figured it's about time you saw my humble abode. The house was not a humble abode. It was a great white clapboard house that stood on the land as if it had been there forever and the town had grown around it. Old oaks stood guard over the grounds and their shadows fell across the yard. Inside the house there was a smell of old wood and polish and something more besides, a smell like turned earth after a rain. His mother was a woman built of small bones and she carried a frantic smile that did not touch her eyes. She moved about the dim rooms with a nervous energy, asking of drinks and of snacks. His father sat in a leather chair and he did not speak. He was a large man whose eyes were dark and still and they followed us as we passed. At 7 o'clock they left. I heard his mother's whispered words to Leo, urgent and low, but I could not make them out. "So, what's the plan?" I asked. I dropped my bag on the floor of his room. The room was a small island of the ordinary in that house, with its posters and its rumpled bed and the console set before the television. It was the only place that did not feel as if it belonged to the dead. "Pizza, video games, the usual," Leo said. He knelt and woke the machine. He moved with a forced calm, but I saw the cording in his neck. We ate the pizza and played the games, and for a time I did not think of the house or of the silence that lay coiled in its other rooms. For a time it was only the two of us and the sounds from the screen. Then near to 9 he paused the game. "Hey, man," he said. He would not look at me but worked the controller in his hands. "There's just one weird rule my parents have." "Weird rule?" "Yeah." He raised his head and his eyes were serious as a stone. "After 9 p.m., we have to be in here. In the bedroom. And we can't leave. Not for anything. Not for the bathroom, not for a drink, nothing. The door stays closed until sunrise." I stared at his face and looked for the jest that was not there. "You're kidding, right? What if I have to pee?" "Pee now," he said. His voice was flat. He gestured with his chin to an empty bottle on his desk. "And after 9, you use that." The laugh I had in my throat died there. "Dude, that's insane." "Why?" He shrugged his shoulders, but the motion was counterfeit. "They're just super weird about security. Old house, you know? They think it's drafty." "Drafty." I knew he was lying, I just didn't know why. Downstairs a clock began to chime the hour and his head snapped toward the door. Bang. 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 He was on his feet before the 9th bell had sounded its note. He crossed the room and closed the door. He slid a heavy bolt of steel into its housing and the sound it made was final. "There," he said. A sweat had bloomed on his brow and he breathed out the word. "We're good." "Leo, what the hell is going on?" I demanded. "Nothing, man. Just a weird rule," he said. He would not look at the door. He turned up the sound of the game until it was a roar in that small room. But I did not see the game. I saw only the bolted door and I felt a coldness take root in my gut. The house was quiet again. But it was not the same quiet. This was a listening quiet. A waiting quiet. And in the dark heart of that house something waited, and we were locked in that room and waiting with it. An hour passed and there was no sound from the house. The fear went out of Leo slowly and he played the game with a feigned calm that did not sit right on him. We played on in that silence and a vexation grew in me at the foolishness of it all. "You really need to tell your parents this is a certifiable way to raise a serial killer," I said. He gave back a fake smile. "Tell me about it." Then came a sound from the rooms below. It was a soft and measured thumping on the boards of the main hall. "What's that?" I whispered. Leo played on. He stared at the screen and his fingers worked the buttons as if he did not hear. "It's nothing. House settling." "That's not the house settling, Leo." The sound ceased. In the quiet I could hear the blood in my own ears. Then there came a new sound which was a dragging sound, a scraping of some great weight across the wood floor beneath us as of a heavy thing with broken feet. I muted the television. "Okay, that's definitely not the house," I said. Leo set the controller down upon the carpet. His face was pale in the shifting light of the screen. "Just ignore it, Liam. Please. It goes away if you ignore it." "What? What is it? What goes away?" Before he could answer, it spoke. The voice came from the hallway, faint at first, on the other side of our door. "Leo? Honey?" I did not move. The voice was his mother's voice. "Leo, sweetheart, your father and I came home early. I brought you boys some warm cookies. Open the door." I looked to Leo and saw a boy cast in tallow. He stared at the door as if it were the gate of hell itself, and he raised a trembling finger to his lips and shook his head. "Leo, that's your mom," I whispered. "Don't be silly, sweetie, we're inside," the voice said. It was just outside the door now. "I just baked your favorites. Chocolate chip. They're getting cold." The scraping from below had stopped. There was only the sweet persuasion of that voice in the silent house. But the voice was wrong. There was a terrible perfection in its sound, like a memory of a voice and not the voice itself. Then came the knocking. It was a soft and wet sound on the far side of the door, as if a piece of meat were striking the wood. "Leo? Liam? Are you boys all right in there? You're being awfully quiet." "Leo," I mouthed, but no sound came. He sat upon the floor like a man made of stone, his eyes wide with a plea that had no words. He looked like something trapped. The knob of the door turned, once to the left and once to the right. Then it began to rattle in its fitting with a growing violence. "Boys, this isn't funny," the voice said. The sweetness broke in it then, and it was replaced with a hard and ragged edge. "Open the door." A great blow struck the door and the frame of it groaned in the wall. I scrambled away from it on my hands and feet until my back was against the far wall of the room. The voice changed. It spoke again, and the voice was a ruin, a low and guttural thing that gurgled in its throat. "Iknowyoureintere." The wet tapping began again, faster now, and frantic. With it came a thin and keening whine, a sound like wind through a crack in the world. And from the dark gap beneath the door a black and viscous fluid began to seep into the room. It was thick as oil, and it carried the smell of the grave, of wet soil and of things that rot in the earth. Leo moved. He crawled to the bed and pulled the blankets over him and became a small and shuddering shape in the dim room. He had gone into his own darkness. On the other side of the door the thing fell silent. I knew it was not gone. I knew that in my bones. It was there in the darkness beyond the door, and it was waiting. I kept my back to the far wall and I watched the door. My breath was a small and panicked thing in my throat. On the bed Leo was a trembling knot of blankets in fear. For me this was a night's journey into that darkness. For him it was the place he lived. A fool's curiosity which has been my ruin more than once warred with the terror. A need to see the shape of the thing that hunted us. A dreadful truth was better than not knowing. I went forward on my stockinged feet and the old boards did not whisper. "Liam, no," came a voice from the bed, muffled by the cloth. Don't look." But I would look. I knelt upon the floor and the reek of the grave was stronger. I lowered my head to the cold brass of the keyhole. At first there was only the dim hall and the moonlight that fell in a pale blade from the window at its end. Then it stepped into the narrow view. It was not a man, nor was it a beast. It was a thing that was built of sticks and of shadow, impossibly tall and thin. Its limbs were the limbs of a winter tree, and its body was a gyre of dust and night that had no true form. It wore his mother's floral apron, the cloth stretched over a hollow space where a chest should be. It wore his father's hunting cap set upon a head that was only a clot of moving dark. It had no face, only a void. In one of its twig-like hands it held a picture I had seen on the wall, a portrait of the family. It held this picture before the void where its face should be, and it wore the smile of Leo's mother for its own. From its body it put forth a long and blackened twig of an arm, and it tapped upon the door. Thump! 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 I threw myself back from the door and clapped a hand to my mouth to keep the gorge from rising. My mind could not hold the shape of what I had seen. This was no creature that had entered the house. This was the house itself, a parasite that wore the stolen keepsakes of the dead or the soon-to-be-dead for its raiment. From the door a new voice whispered, and the blood in me went to ice. "Liam? Why are you hiding in there? Your mother is so worried about you." It was my own mother's voice. Perfect. The voice she used when I was a child and sick with fever, the call to supper from a life I would not see again. A wave of homesickness and of horror washed over me, for I wanted to be home and I was not. And the thing in the hall gave a low chuckle that was the sound of dry leaves scuttling on a stone walk. It knew it had found the part of me that was soft. "Let me in, Liam," my mother's voice whispered, a sound of love and of poison. "I've come to take you home." I fell back to the wall and slid to the floor, and I felt the heat of shame in my thighs where my body had betrayed me. I looked at the trembling shape on the bed. The bottle he had offered. It had not been a joke. It had not been a rule but a kindness. A tool for survival, for he knew. He knew all of it. The scraping began upon the door itself. A slow and patient sound, as of a claw being sharpened upon the wood. All the while it whispered my name in the voice of my mother, and it promised me an end to all this if I would but unlatch the door. The hours passed in that room, and the thing outside did not cease its siege. It spoke in the voices of the living and of those I could not know, a gallery of ghosts at the door. It offered warmth and food. It promised an end to the long night. And all the while it scraped at the wood with a patience that was a madness to hear. The fear had burned away in me and left a hard and bitter anger. I was angry at the thing in the hall and at the people who had built for it a cage and called it a home, and I was angry at the boy who hid in his blankets and would not speak. Hours passed. "Leo," I said. My voice was a dry croak in my throat. "Leo, wake up." A shape stirred in the bed. He looked out from the pale fortress of his sheets and his eyes were raw with fear. "Is it gone?" he whispered. "No, it's not gone," I said. "I need to know what this is. Now. No more lies. What is that thing?" He flinched from the sound of my voice. He sat up in the bed and hugged his knees to his chest and would not look at me. "I don't know what it is," he mumbled to the door. "We just call it the Nightman. It's always been here. As long as my family has." The story came out of him then, a broken telling in the dark. A great-great-grandfather had built this house upon unhallowed ground. And from the first night there was a wrongness in the wood and in the walls. A bargain had been struck in that time, an unspoken covenant with the darkness. The family would have the house by the light of day. But from 9 until the dawn the house was given over to that other. "It gets lonely," Leo whispered. A tear cut a clean path through his face. "It likes to play. It mimics people. It uses things it finds to try and make a body for itself. The apron. The hat. The picture. But it's getting bolder," he said, and his voice trembled in the small room. "It used to just make noise. Now, it tries to get in. The rules were enough before. Stay in your room. Don't look. Don't listen. But now it wants more." He finally met my eyes and I saw in them a guilt as deep and as cold as a well. It wants someone new. A cold truth settled in my soul, and it wounded me. The sudden invite. The fear in his parents' eyes. The heavy bolt on the door. You brought me here for it?" "No. I didn't want to." The boy's voice broke. "My parents, they said it was getting too strong. That it wouldn't be satisfied with just them anymore. They said if it had someone new, someone not from the family, maybe it would be satisfied. Maybe it would leave us alone for a while." He had led me here as a lamb to the altar. His parents had not gone out. They were in this house, in their own locked room, and they were listening. They were praying that the beast in the hall would choose me. And then the scraping stopped. The whispers died. The house fell into a quiet so profound it was like the earth had stopped its turning. "What's happening?" I breathed. Leo's eyes grew wide. From the floor below a new sound came. The sound of feet on the stairs. Heavy. A footfall. And the dragging of a dead weight. Thump. Drag. Thump. Drag. It was not trying to trick us. The game was done. The footsteps ceased outside our door. The silence held for a count of 3. Then a crack like thunder sounded as a great force struck the door. The wood splintered and the deadbolt shrieked in its housing. Crack! A web of breaks spidered from the lock. A fine dust of ruined wood fell to the floor. "It's never done this before," Leo whimpered. He crawled away toward the dark corner of the room. "It's never tried to break the door down." Crack! Bang! The deadbolt was torn from the frame like a tooth from a jaw. The door swung inward on its hinges with a sad and final groan. And in the blackness of the hall, I saw it. There was no void. It had filled itself. Its body was a terrible congress of things stolen from the house. Floorboards for shins and rusted pipes for arms. Its torso a twisted cage of stair banisters, and within that cage I saw my own duffel bag, and it pulsed like some dark and foreign heart. Its head was the grandfather clock from the hall. It leaned upon its neck of twisted wood, and the pendulum swung behind the glass face like a wild and frantic eye. From the clock a voice came, not one voice but all of them, a discordant chorus speaking as one. "Time. Is. Up." The door swung open on its ruined hinges, and the thing assembled from the house's bones stepped into the room. Its coming was a grinding of parts, a clicking of old wood and metal, and the air filled with the smell of sawdust and the deep earth of the grave. Leo cried out, a sound of pure terror that was lost in the noise of the thing's advance. A hot and primal fear seized me, not of a predator but of a thing that was wrong in the world. I took up a glass trophy from the desk and I threw it with all the strength that I had. It struck the face of the grandfather clock and the glass shattered in a spray of bright shards. The thing reeled back. It made a sound like all the clocks in the world striking some final and calamitous hour at once. It gave us a moment. "The window!" I screamed. I grabbed Leo by his arm and dragged him, for he was a thing of stone. My fingers were slick with sweat and they slipped upon the window latch. It would not give. It had been painted into its frame. The thing righted itself. The broken glass of its face caught the moonlight in 1,000 crazed points of light. It came for us, its arm of rusted pipe raised up to strike. "The bed! Help me with the bed!" I yelled. Adrenaline found him at last and he moved. We set our shoulders to the heavy oak bedstead and turned it onto its side and made of it a poor and flimsy barricade. The creature stumbled into the mattress and its feet, made of chair legs and other things, became tangled in the sheets. It roared, and it began to tear the bed apart with its hands, ripping the guts of it out onto the floor. We were trapped in the corner of the room with the unyielding window at our backs. "The sun," Leo gasped, and his eyes were wild. "It's the only thing. It has to be inside before the sun comes up." I looked out into the night and the sky was a deep and starless black. We did not have hours. The creature tore itself free of the ruined bed. It came on, slow now, for it knew that we were its own. It raised a hand made of silverware from the kitchen, the forks and the spoons bound together to make a shining and terrible claw. And then I saw a thing tucked behind his television. It was a high-powered flashlight. A last and desperate thought came to me. I lunged and took up the cold metal of the flashlight. The thing was upon me. I smelled the dust of its body and I saw the brass pendulum swinging in its broken face. I found the switch and a great pillar of white struck it full in its head. It shrieked a sound of pure agony. The light did not burn it but seemed to unmake it from itself. The spoons of its hand clattered to the floor. A floorboard on its leg split and fell away. The light was a poison to the thing's very being. It shielded the ruin of its face with its pipe arm and it stumbled into the shadows by the door. And in that room began the longest watch of my life. I held the light like a sword and the beam of it was the only thing that held the creature at bay. Leo huddled behind me and cried out when it scuttled at the edges of the room. We were keepers of a light against a great and pressing dark, and the strength in my arm burned away and the batteries that fueled our light would not last. The creature would lunge and I would drive it back with the beam and we would wait and listen to it breathing in the shadows. The hours passed this way, in a stalemate between the light and the dark. The beam of the light began to fail. It flickered. "It's dying," I gasped. "Just a little longer," Leo urged, his eyes fixed upon the window. Just a little longer. The creature knew. It gathered itself in the dark as the beam dimmed to a sad yellow glow, and with a final and triumphant roar, it charged. In that same moment, a pale gray line was drawn upon the black horizon. It was the first sign of dawn. The thing struck me and the flashlight was knocked from my hand. I was on the floor and the monster stood over me, its clock face bent low, and I saw my own face reflected in the arc of the swinging pendulum. Then a single and pure ray of the morning sun pierced the window and touched the creature's back. It froze. A profound stillness came over it. Then it began to come apart. The clock head crumbled to a fine dust. The pipe arms fell from its shoulders and clattered on the floorboards. The banisters of its chest unwound. The stolen silver and the splintered wood in my own duffel bag all collapsed into a heap of simple things. In moments, all that was left was this pile of refuse and a thin layer of gray dust that smelled of the grave. The sun streamed through the window and filled the ruined room with light. I lay upon the floor and gasped for breath. Leo wept against the wall, a sound of relief and of terror. We had lived. There were footsteps in the hall. Not of a monster, but of a man. The door to his parents' room opened. A moment later they stood in our doorway. They did not look at the ruin of the room, nor at the pile of debris on the floor where the creature had been. They looked at me. And I saw on their faces not relief nor any gladness, but only a deep and bottomless disappointment. The horror was not ended. I knew then that the plan had failed. The sacrifice had not been made. The thing that was the house would be hungry when the sun fell again. I was the one who got away. And for this, they would never forgive me.